Welcome to the International Workshop on Promoting Research Integrity, hosted jointly by the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Science and Technology. Now we will welcome the opening remarks by Dr. Andrew Wang, Distinguished Research Fellow and former Vice President of Academia Sinica. 王惠君院士是我们今天的主持人，谢谢大家，请欢迎鼓励。
Good morning. Thank you for coming to this workshop. And we are, well, I shouldn't say pleased, but we are serious about this workshop and happy to have Dr. John Delberg here. Now, John, I will introduce him a bit later. But this event, I think, was organized by Ministry of Education and Ministry of Science and Technology jointly, and they feel that in view of the recent events recently in Taiwan, they feel that it's important that we have this workshop held before the end of the year. So they asked Dr. Henry's son, Sun Tongtian Yuan Si, to organize this meeting. And Henry, of course, has known John for many years. They both are very interested in the research integrity issues. And so they contact John, and John gracefully agreed to come in a very short notice. And so we thank him for this effort. And Henry is not able to come, so he asked me to chair this session. So before I start to introduce John, let me say just one slide to demonstrate it's kind of a coincidence that this 2 weeks ago on Nature, the editorial, they have a short article in there. If you are interested, you can go and have a look at it on the December 1 issue. And it talks about this post-publication scrutiny of papers. Okay, it is essential. Sorry, it is essential for science development, and but it should be done politely. That's the that's the title. And one of the comments in there, very important comment highlighted here, is anyone who finds flaws should seek corrections with diplomacy and humility. 不太好是吧? Okay. Well, I won't repeat the previous comments, but just to say that, you know, I think people or humans make mistakes. That's a common event, okay? When you walk on the street, at the crossroad, you want to turn right, but somehow you turn left. Well, that's a mistake, okay? And there are all kinds of mistakes in the morning. For example, this morning I was drinking coffee, and I want to add sugar, and all of a sudden I was confused. I add salt to it. And that's a mistake too. But this kind of mistake we can tolerate, and you know, next time I will be more careful not to make this kind of mistake. But in science, when we do research, we also make mistakes. But most of the mistakes we make are not by intention. You know, we just design incorrectly or you know, what have you. And so those mistakes can be corrected. And this kind of mistake, you should not view it as a big flaw, okay? But there are cases where someone will intentionally manufacture data or make strange, you know, diagrams or whatever. Those should not be allowed. But how do you find this and correct it is an important issue. We will, I think John today will give us a lot of insights on this and show us how we handle this kind of thing. So the attitudes should be established correctly. So let me move on to the next slides. I will take this opportunity to introduce John. John is sitting here now. And Dr. Delberg, he is formerly the Deputy Director of the this Office of Research Integrity, in short, ORI, of NIH. Okay, so his background is as following. He was educated in biology at Brandeis University, where I was at Boston for 14 years. So Brandeis I know very well, and he's about in 1963 he got a BA in biology. Later in 1968 got a PhD from Purdue University. So from the Midwest there. And then he stayed at NIH, the National Cancer Institute, for many, many years, from 68 to 92. Later, he became the senior scientist in the Office of Research Integrity from 92 to 96. Okay. And later, he becomes an expert advisor for ORI. Okay. So he has a very, very integrated experience in this kind of research integrity. So he was the director of a division of investigative oversight, ORI, and from 2013, wait a minute, what is 13 to 15? What does that mean? Oh. Anyway, yeah, been the deputy director of ORI. Okay, so he is extremely insightful and experienced. So his team contributed greatly in terms of educating us on the research integrity, and he established an excellent investigative team, and then co-developed software of detecting manipulated images and data. And that's actually, so he's the inventor of this checking all the gel patterns and so on. So this particular technology development, of course, leads to a lot of kind of insights on whether or not something is wrong in the paper, okay? And I'm sure there are more and more technology will be developed. I think it's part of a validation process, in my field, structural biology, we use other methods to validate our data, whether it makes sense or not, or you have falsified things and so on. So we have this so-called PDB data bank in there. When you solve your structure, you deposit there, there is a series of algorithms that will detect whether or not something is wrong in your structure, okay? So all this are becoming more and more, so we should be aware of that. Don't try to attempt to make falsified data in there. So later, he investigated conducted many investigations in the institute and so on. Okay, so he probably Henry's son, offered this kind of a 3 days training workshop for research integrity. Okay, this is very useful. So today he will only give 2 lectures, so that's very short. But he has a very complete document. So we should all learn from this document how to, for each institution, how to operate this. Okay, so here as deputy director, he provided guidance for ORI staff and responded to over 400 allegations per year. That's a lot. And of course, those are allegations, and whether or not they are true, they have to investigate and give a kind of a decision later. And he assisted the division of this investigative office staff to decide how best to conduct oversight reviews on complex misconduct cases and so on. Okay, so he's extremely experienced, is a leader in this area. So we are really grateful that he will give us this direction. And so he went all over the world, co-sponsor this international conferences on research integrity. So today he's going to give us 2 lectures. The first lecture for about 1 hour. We'll leave about 5 minutes of Q&A, have a short break, and then he will give us the second lecture. And after that, we'll have 20 minutes of Q&As. I think today, let's keep in mind that he will give us a general view of this research integrity, not on individual cases. So please don't ask him those individual cases, okay? Thank you. John, let's get started. Thank you very much.
What I've been, and I want to thank Dr. Wang for a very nice introduction, and I also want to thank all the many folks who have invited me and been very good about taking care of my accommodations. I'm dealing with a little bit of foot pain, so I'm not going to stand up to give my talk. But I will do what I can to, I think I hit the wrong button here, to deal with research misconduct as it's handled in the United States by institutions and by ORI, primarily in the area of biomedical research. Misconduct in the United States is dealt with by individual federal agencies, and I'll get to that a little bit later just in passing, but ORI only has jurisdiction over research funded by what we call the Public Health Service, which is part of the Health and Human Services, and it includes NIH, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and the Food and Drug Administration, among other things. There are some smaller agencies that are also on the PHS, but we don't really have cases with them. Other cases of misconduct where ORI has had cooperation include the Veterans Administration, because they do biomedical research as well. The Department of Defense does some biomedical research. Of course, the Department of Energy does as well, and so forth. So sometimes cases overlap with ours, and of course NSF, National Science Foundation, has a large research portfolio as well, and we've had very close relationships with NSF for many years. So this first talk is going to be focusing on some acronyms. So I'm going to define acronyms so that we can use some shorthand during our talk and not hopefully confuse you too much. Some of them are pretty obvious. Research misconduct, we're going to call RM. Questionable research practices, which we'll get to after we discuss the history of ORI and what the federal definition of research misconduct is and what it isn't. Questionable research practices include certain things that are considered perhaps inappropriate by most scientists, but which do not meet the criteria for research misconduct findings. And I'll give a couple of examples of that. And then the bottom line is always an interest in preventing misconduct. And there are ways in which that's been promoted in the United States. The government has, the NIH and both NIH and NSF have now require training in RCR for trainees. In other words, those who receive NIH training grants have to have training in RCR. NSF is more global. They require all grantees to get training, but it's a complex issue, and I don't have time for a lot of talk about RCR, but ORI's website is full of resources on RCR, and we'll show you some links later. So the first talk, as I said, will cover research misconduct, questionable research practices, QRPs, the importance of scientific integrity education, which is RCR, and we'll